Hello again. Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here along with new look Alfred Ezman. Look at that. The picture quality, the lighting,
Ev
this man is transforming before our eyes. We're going to talk about Kentucky and A&M making the College World Series. We did do a live stream on Sunday night. We talked about Georgia in the winner's bracket advancing to Monday. And we talked about Florida's win over Clemson. And we talked about Tennessee's win over Evansville, which was in the process of happening. So we recapped those. Now we're going to do Kentucky mostly and a little A&M. We also talked about A&M, but that's what we'll do today. We'll talk about those teams and look a little bit ahead to the College World Series. But first, a reminder, we are brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup playoffs this season. Every stat, matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker. Unwind with one of our 150 slots games. Head to the website today. Get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online. The game starts here. Well, let's start in Lexington, where late last night the Kentucky Wildcats clinched their first ever trip to the College World Series and did it in kind of Kentucky-like fashion. A clutch pitching and one of the crazier base running plays you'll ever seen. Nolan McCarthy on second base. There's a wild pitch. Baseball 101. Pitcher covers home plate in the event of a wild pitch. And to Oregon State's defense a little bit, you don't expect the guy to take two bases on a wild pitch. But that is what has made Kentucky go all year. McCarthy looks up. Home plate is not covered. He slides in pretty easily, puts the Cats up 3-2. That held up. Nick Mingione, very emotional after the game, and he had every right to be. You could see him almost just collapse from the joy, the emotion of the moment, the dugout. You saw him break up in the press conference later. An unbelievable job. Our SEC Coach of the Year, Nick Mingione, is now taking Kentucky to Omaha.
Yeah, here they come, and they're rolling. They, like you said, Chris, they won this in Kentucky fashion. It's a low-scoring base running game. I mean, if you want to talk about Oregon State, both of their runs were walked in, earlier in the game as well, which is kind of like the way Kentucky does it. So just an all-around Kentucky Wildcat baseball game. And, I mean, got to give credit to that team. It's been an incredible year. I talked about this last night, Sunday night, when we did the live stream, and I'll say it again. It's a team who I don't think necessarily, from me included, gets enough credit for what they've done, just because of the way they play. It's not as flashy or it's not as clickbait worthy as some of these other teams, but they did it. And here we are with a 45-14 record, head into the College World Series, and they're a big threat because they're in the favorable side of the bracket, and we'll have to see how that gets completed tonight, obviously, with Georgia and NC State. But shout out the Wildcats. Great year, and it's going to continue. I think they're going to win some games once they get to Omaha.
Yeah, let's start with the pitching because I think that's where it started. Kind of an unusual stat line. Kentucky last night walked 9 guys, which is not common. Struck out 13, also not common. You had 5 Wildcats combined to throw 176 pitches. Mason Moore starts at 82 pitches, just 46 for strikes. Walked 6 guys, so not his best outing. Robert Hogan, kind of the bridge guy between, or after Cameron O'Brien, who was their best pitcher, went 3 innings, threw 47 pitches, struck out 5, did not give up any runs. And then it got a little dicey in the 9th. Hogan and Hagenau had some issues. Oregon State had runners 2nd and 3rd before Johnny Hummel, who is their closer, who really has not pitched much lately, was just dominant the first, 2.5 months of the year, and then really got touched up and maybe lost his confidence. He closed it out on 3 pitches. But I think the thing for Kentucky, in a game where pitching is going to be maybe a little bit more valuable in Omaha, we've talked about Kentucky finding O'Brien late in the year. I mean, they didn't find him late in the year, but I think maybe he threw his best late in the year. Moore is ending it on a little bit better of a hot streak. We've talked about Poozer has been so consistent. I think the biggest takeaway I have, Oregon State had not been shut out in 125 games. Got shut out in game 1, got 4 hit in game 2. Oregon State went how many innings in this thing without scoring a run? I guess went 13 innings in the Super Regional without scoring a run. Again, team that scored over 500 runs this year. I think takeaway number one for Kentucky is the Cats pitching is coming up big right at the end when it matters the most.
Yeah, and against the lineup, I mean, this Oregon State team's no slouch at this point, and anyone who makes a Super Regional is not a slouch team, and they held this team down. I mean, even tonight with the runs they scored, or I guess last night, excuse me, with the runs they scored, uh, 2 walks. It was Mason Moore loading the bases and walking in a few runs. And Mason Moore had 6 runs on his outing, and that didn't really come until the 4th inning when Oregon State did it. So it was up to the bullpen to shut it down for Kentucky, and they did. O'Brien, 1 hit in 3 innings, 5 strikeouts. He's been phenomenal. That really started in Hoover and has just carried through the rest of this postseason. And then obviously Johnny Hummel. It's good to see him back out there, Chris, because he kind of, like you said, fell off a good bit, and here he is now, right back here. Granted, it's only a third of an inning and a strikeout to secure the save, but regardless, that'll kind of boost his confidence because they'll need all hands on deck for Omaha. And I mean, Kentucky has the perfect combination in everything brewing. And I would like to think that they're arguably the team that has it going the most heading into the College World Series with what they're doing on the mound and at the plate. And really, holding down this lineup was very key for them. I mean, the guys who had hits for Oregon State, Bazana had a hit, but it was in 4 at bats. Wilson Weber, Brady Casper had hits as well. I think that's it. Yeah, 3 hits, 2 hits on the night for Oregon State. Or those were RBIs, excuse me. Brady Casper had the hit. Bazana had the hit. And that was it. I was looking at the RBI column. But yeah, 2 hits on the night for the Beavers, and they held them down. They held a really, really good team down this Super Regional round.
Yeah, keeping Travis Bazana in the park is a great start. They got that. I think Kentucky, you look at the lineup, and they've been so good between, Waldschmidt. It felt like nobody got Waldschmidt out since about February. He goes 0 for 4. The first 4 guys in the lineup last night, 0 for 16 with no walks. But who was it? McCarthy goes 2 for 2, knocks in 2 runs, scores the winning run. Grant Smith made a very uncharacteristic fielding error. It just felt like it was not a typical Kentucky game. The walks, all those things, but they persevered and knocked out a really, really good Oregon State team. Now the Cats will go to Omaha for the first time. Will they get the winner of either North Carolina State or Georgia, which we'll find that one out on Monday. And Kentucky and Georgia played earlier in the year, and Kentucky swept that series in Lexington.
Yeah. I mean, they get a really favorable matchup. The thing, too, about it, Chris, with Kentucky, if Georgia wins tonight, that'll be an all SEC side of the bracket, and I think Kentucky would want that over teams they haven't necessarily played just because they've seen them. And, I think that the Georgia matchup obviously favors them because they were able to sweep them like they did. And obviously we have to wait on that game. And with this Georgia team, it seems like, they're one of those home run ball teams and that sort of thing. Yeah. And with the park factor at Charles Schwab, it's a little bit different. And we said last night that plays in the Kentucky's favor more so than it does pretty much every other team, albeit we have to research some of the ACC teams that are in it. But it favors Kentucky, it seems like, more so than most of the other teams in the field of 8. And who knows? I mean, that could be a really good first matchup for them, and they could, hit the ground running on the way to competing for a national title.
Yeah, that park does, I think, stand to benefit Kentucky maybe more than anybody else in the tournament. You got a lot of foul territory. It's not a park where you're going to, as a team. I mean, although you did see last year the ball got out in pretty crazy fashion, especially LSU and Florida, although those were some pretty elite power hitting teams.
Yeah,
I just think that favors Kentucky more. You got a lot of ground ball guys. You got a defense. Mitchell Daly made a tremendous play last night at third in the 9th inning. Grant Smith, despite the error last night, just been a rock. Petray at second, I think, was maybe a Gold Glove winner. You got some athleticism in the outfield. I just think no team in the field is probably more suited to the way the park plays than the Cats are. They'll hit doubles, they'll run, they'll bunt, they'll do all sorts of stuff that you just don't see most other teams do in the bulk and fashion with the effectiveness that the Cats do it. And one more thing before we move on to A&M. Kentucky's first College World Series appearance, the fans really showed up en masse. Great to see huge crowds at Kentucky Proud Park. They're starting to get media coverage, which has lacked there for years. You got a likable coach who I think does a lot of things the right way. That is, I would say, if you named the programs most difficult to win at in this league, I think Missouri and Kentucky would be on the top of the list. I'd probably put Kentucky is an easier place to win than Missouri because Missouri's just struggled since it's been in the league. But northern climate, hard to get people out for games early in the year. You got basketball going. Kentucky's had flashes here and there. It'll win a conference title every 10 or 12 years, but the postseason success has been elusive. Under Nick Mingione, Kentucky's now put back-to-back elite seasons together, got to a super regional last year, and now to Omaha. So hats off to Nick Mingione. He was our coach of the year, did a great job. All right. Texas A&M was not finished last night as we did this video. A&M had just gone up with that 9-run inning. I don't think I've ever seen a team in college baseball score 9 runs on 2 hits. That's what A&M did to break this game open. It leaned on Evan Aschenbeck. I remember we were doing the live stream. I said, this game's not over, but it might be over now because they brought in, the guy that inning for inning outside of maybe Hagen Smith was the most effective guy in the country. Look, the Aggies did this without Braden Montgomery. You saw that scary injury in inning 3 of whatever the opener. His replacement, Kaeden Kent, was really the big guy who keyed that run last night, had the only 2 hits in that inning. A&M, the pitching was not really good in this one. And that's the weird thing. I think if you'd said, all right, what's the worst case scenario for A&M? I would have said, well, maybe getting a star hurt and having your reliable arms not be so reliable. That was the case. Montgomery hurt his foot or hurt his ankle, done for the tournament. You saw Ryan Prager had his worst outing of the year. Shane Sdao moved to the rotation, didn't pitch well last night. Brad Rudis came on in relief, didn't pitch well. Tanner Jones hadn't pitched well in a while, didn't pitch well again last night. But they went to the rest of that bullpen, and they went to Aschenbeck at the end. He gives him 3 innings, 1 run, and the Aggies heading to Omaha where they'll face the Florida Gators.
Yeah, it was a depth thing last night. Well, part of it last night, too, in that 7th, in case, anyone who watches this missed that live stream. Brock Moore, the Oregon closer, walked in countless 5 Texas A&M
and
runs and hit a guy. I put that a lot on Oregon's managers because it's just like, I don't know why you're leaving the guy out there, regardless of whether or not your arm's ready. You got to get someone new out there and pitching. But it just ended up that way. And really, Oregon just could not respond. And a lot of that was because of Evan Aschenbeck. Looking at him, what he did, 3 innings of work, 2 hits, 1 earned run. That was, I believe, Dominic Hellman's homer in garbage time for Oregon late there to give them 9 runs in the game, and it was. And then 4 strikeouts as well to top off with that in 12 batters faced. So Aschenbeck, is the best reliever in this country. I think me and Chris have said that, and that's been the mojo, I think, until the end of the year. And he's just going to be, very key for Texas A&M going forward, especially, with some of the pitching not pitching up to the standard it had been all tournament. We talked about it with Prager this weekend, and then Sdao even yesterday going just a third. Rudis can really get a whole lot of traction either, going just 2/3. And, thankfully the Aggies had a guy there late that can kind of hold it down and secure it. And the offense, honestly, for A&M, looking back on it last night, I know a lot of it was on Oregon, but a lot of them came through, in place of Braden Montgomery, which is what they're going to need to do. You look at it, Jackson Appel, 2 for 5, Lavalette, 4 at-bats, 2 RBIs in those 4 at-bats. Hayden Schott, 4 for 4, 3 runs and 4 RBIs. That guy probably could have won the game by himself if he wanted to. And then, going down the list even further, Kaeden Kent, obviously 5 RBIs on that grand slam. He went 3 for 5. And there's a few guys who were, we didn't expect to go 0 for. Travis Chestnut, we were saying, had been great, for the Aggies a lot. He went 0 for. But in the end, a lot of the supporting cast did well enough to get Texas A&M that win, and they did it when Oregon had 14 hits in the game. So that's very good to see that Texas A&M still was able to control that game despite Oregon having tons of offense.
Yeah, and if you watch that big inning last night, the one thing that stood out was they just don't chase pitches. And here's what kind of sums things up: the balance of that lineup. I'm just going to read down from the top. Jackson Appel, 2 hits, 1 walk. Jace Lavalette, 1 hit, 1 walk. Gavin Grahovac, 1 hit. Hayden Schott, 4 hits, 1 walk. Ted Burton, no hits, 1 walk. Caden Sorrell, no hits, but also a walk. Ali Camarillo, 1 hit, 2 walks. Kaeden Kent, 3 hits. Chestnut didn't get a hit, but walked twice. They made them use so many pitches last night. Oregon threw 212 pitches.
God.
212 pitches. And I guess A&M did hit the night because they were the road team. But, I mean, that's absurd. That is how you wear through teams in the postseason. And that is why I will still go with the Aggies, I think, is my pick to win this whole thing. They were my pre-tournament pick. I know they'd be better with Braden Montgomery, but I'm still going to stick with them. And it's just watching that inning unfold. And it's not just reading the box score, but how good the eyes are and the discipline is out of that lineup. Combined with that pitching, which, again, did not really show up for the regional like I thought it would. But A&M faced so much adversity in this thing and advanced anyway. And I just think that tells you how good this team really is.
Yeah, we have no reason right now to think that their depth around Montgomery can't carry the weight. It has, through these 2 some odd games that they've been without him. And we saw it last night. It wasn't necessarily everyone, but it was key players that needed to step up that did. And with the pitch, I think the biggest thing with them is the pitching. I mean, I don't think they can pitch like they did last night and really this weekend as a whole in Omaha. But at the same time, you got until this weekend, you know what I mean, to figure that out. So they have time to get adjusted to it. And it was sort of like the thing we talked about with Tennessee, where their pitching, that second middle Evansville game wasn't what we've seen from them. Same thing with A&M. We've seen better many, many times. We've seen more better than worse from them this season with their pitching. And yeah, we have no reason to think this is going to sway, what they do in Omaha whatsoever, the Montgomery injury, just because of what this offense can do without him. We've seen it against a Oregon team that, made a super regional and was very competitive. So, here they are in Omaha, and they have, I'm with you, Chris. I don't know if they're my national title pick, but I'll pick them, to win some games at least in Omaha while they're there.
Yeah, I think they get the easier side of the bracket.
Mhm.
I'll tell you the bracket, and I think an A&M Kentucky matchup would sure be a lot of fun because those teams didn't play during the regular season. Any case, we'll have you covered for Omaha. We'll have some reactions. We'll have some previews. Best way to get all that, hit that subscribe button and the like button. For Alfred Ezman, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by BetOnline.